Man, do you remember the hype behind Toy Story 3? 2010 was a pretty great year for animated films. You of course got Toy Story 3, but there was also Tangled, DreamWorks had 3 big movies coming out this year, Studio Ghibli had Arity, and it was the debut year for Illumination with the first Despicable Me. Yeah, that's a pretty stellar lineup for this year. But back to Toy Story 3. This film broke box office records. So much merchandise I remember seeing. It was even nominated for Best Picture when it came out. That's crazy to think about. Funny thing though, I never actually saw Toy Story 3 in theaters. It was mostly because at the time it came out, I was visiting family in the summer and we weren't really seeing any movies in theaters. But later that year, I did get most of these animated films that came out in 2010 on DVD, including Toy Story 3, and wow, I loved it so much. I watched this movie as much as Toy Story 2 back then. It was so good. The story of this film was emotional. There was a lot of funny scenes. It was gorgeous to look at. Gosh, I loved this film so much back then. Nowadays, I still really like Toy Story 3. It may not be one of my favorite Pixar films. I don't know, I still much prefer Toy Story 2. But I can't deny that Toy Story 3 still holds up extremely well today. But I am curious. Let me know in the comments what your experience with this movie was like. I'm really interested to see if you guys still think the film holds up a decade later. Gosh, I can't believe this film is 10 years old now. Now, the video game adaptation was a game I heard so many things about. It's considered one of the best movie licensed games by a lot of people, and I was really looking forward to playing it for the first time in this marathon. I gotta talk about the development for this game though, since it's pretty interesting. So, THQ and Heavy Iron were the ones who did the last couple Pixar games, and they had pitched their idea of a Toy Story 3 game to Pixar. Unfortunately, their pitch was rejected, but you can still find video footage of what their demo looked like. I gotta say, it's pretty cool to see. I always wondered what if Pixar chose THQ and Heavy Iron to do the Toy Story 3 game. It would have been pretty interesting to see. And you know, this story of a different version of Toy Story 3 actually reminds me how the actual Toy Story 3 film also had a completely different version originally by Circle 7 Animation. So it's kind of ironic that both the movie and the game had a pretty similar development story. But ultimately, Pixar decided to go with Disney's in-house studio, Avalanche Software, to develop the Wii, PS3, 360, and PC versions. Avalanche has made a ton of Disney games, but you would also know them best for the original TAC games. They also did some old arcade ports to home consoles, and what I would know them best for, Dragon Ball Z Sagas, which, it's such a lovely game. But before we get into the main version of Toy Story 3 most people know, did you know that Toy Story 3 also came out on the PS2 in 2010? Yeah, so the PS2 had a long lifespan, which makes sense since it is the best-selling system of all time. So we had a couple of games come out pretty late into its lifespan, including Toy Story 3. In fact, Toy Story 3 on the PS2 was initially released as a bundle with a PS2 Slim in 2010, before getting a regular release a few days later. I just find it crazy that Toy Story 3 got a PS2 version so late into its lifespan and was even bundled with the system itself. That's legit crazy. Now, the PS2 version is actually more of an upscaled port of the PSP version, with both of these games being developed by Asobo. Yeah, despite Heavy Iron not developing the main Toy Story 3 this time, Asobo still handled the PS2 and PSP version. So let's see what a PS2 game in 2010 is like. So graphically, yeah, you can definitely tell this game was more designed for the PSP in mind. It doesn't look very good for a PS2 game. It definitely looks a lot better on the PSP from what I've seen. At least on the PS2, it's more visually appealing than something like PS2 Up though. I'll give it that. The soundtrack is really good, and while there aren't a ton of songs, it sounds great. The story is basically a retelling of the film, but what I like about this is that it's all presented through these really cute drawings. This is so wholesome. I believe most of the characters, except for a few, have their actors from the film, and they sound really good here. It really feels like you're playing through the actual movie. So this is a 3D platformer, just like Toy Story 2. However, this time it's linear and not as open as before. The goal is basically to get to the end or find a certain number of items to progress. It's pretty simple, all things considered, but it controls really well. It feels so good moving around, and platforming is really fun. You mainly control Woody and Buzz throughout the game, though there are 2 levels where you control Jessie and even the army men soldiers. All the characters play pretty much the same, but what really sells this game is the level design. Like I said back in the Toy Story 2 and Ratatouille vids, I love games that make you travel through everyday environments as a small character, and this game takes advantage of that idea so well. You'll be sneaking past humans, you'll be platforming through the inside of the walls, jumping through multiple cars, even going through the giant trash compactor. There's so much variety in the levels you travel through, and all of these levels are really fun. I think my favorite has to be the highway stage. I mean, this never happened in the film, but it's so much fun jumping from car to car. There's also this one stage with the green aliens, and it's alright, but nothing I found too exciting. Once you beat a stage, you get some tokens you could use to unlock a bunch of bonus materials, such as concept art and images from the movie, just like other Pixar games. Also, by beating a stage, you unlock some challenges you could do. However, I couldn't show any of these off since I was on a tight schedule, but still, it's nice for replay value. But there are 2 other modes this game has, the Buzz Lightyear Adventures and Woody's Roundup. Buzz Lightyear's mode is basically playing through the actual Buzz Lightyear game from the beginning of Toy Story 2. It's basically an action game where you shoot a bunch of robots and try to make it to the end to face off against Zurg. It's short, but it's pretty fun. Woody's Roundup, on the other hand, it's okay. I love the style these games have. It captures that old classic TV look, but it's just dodging obstacles and that's kinda it. Not bad at all, but I much prefer Buzz Lightyear's minigames. The strange part about the minigames though, were that on the PSP version, you actually had to buy them via DLC, whereas in the PS2 version, well, it's all unlockable here. That's extremely odd. Not sure why the PSP version couldn't just have all the minigames in the game itself without having to pay for them. I gotta say though, this is by far the best pacing for any of the Asobo developed Pixar games. None of the levels drag on, everything has a good pace, and I love that. I will say I probably like Asobo's Ratatouille game a bit more than their Toy Story 3 game. I just find it more satisfying to play. But their Toy Story 3 game is really solid. I definitely prefer it over their WALL-E game, and especially their Up game. This was a good time, and I would recommend checking this version out. But now, let's go into the big one for this video. Toy Story 3 on PS3, Xbox 360, Wii, and PC. So we start off on the train scene just like the PS2 version, and wow, this game looks beautiful. The characters look great, the environments recreate the movie really well, and it all feels alive. Absolutely gorgeous. This is the best looking Pixar game by far. Also, once again, the music and voice acting is great, and you even have You Got a Friend in Me to play in the menus, just like the Toy Story 2 game. That's so awesome. So, there are 2 main modes that make up Avalanche's Toy Story 3, but we'll start with the story mode. Also, again, I love that the menu is this little board game. I just love the attention to detail in both of these games. It doesn't actually follow the film's plot as closely as the PS2 one. It still hits similar beats, but most of the levels are original. So it's still a platformer and you still play as Woody and Buzz. Jessie is also playable, however she is more prominently featured here than she was on the PS2. You'll need to switch between the 3 characters to get through certain obstacles, and wow, this game just controls so well. Like, I cannot stress how good the movement feels between all 3 characters. It feels just right, and I love that each character feels really different to play as. I think the teamwork gameplay works really well. Like you see in the movies, all these toys working together, and it's great that the game replicates that. It really feels like you're in the Toy Story universe. Now, there are a few levels where the style of gameplay is a little different, And honestly, these are probably the best stages in the whole game. Now don't get me wrong, I do like the teamwork levels, but there are a few other stages that don't have that are just so good. You thought the Buzz Lightyear game from the PS2 version was pretty good? Oh man, here you literally play through the opening scene of Toy Story 2. And it's beautiful. Look at this. It's a childhood's dream right here. You got the beginning on the surface, the spike wall, the colored platforms, the fight with Zurg. This level is awesome. One of the best stages in the whole game. I also love this stage where Molly's playing with Woody and her toys. You platform through a giant room with burning coffee rising. Then you go through space and grind on these rails like it's Sonic Adventure 2. Gosh, this level is really fun. I just love the creativity these stages have. Best part is that you can even play through the entire game in co-op with a friend, even in the levels that don't even have teamwork. That's really cool. I do wish the campaign was a little longer. It's much shorter than the PS2 version, but man, these levels were just really fun to play through. And that's not even the best part of the game. No, we haven't even gotten to the big thing people remember the most about Toy Story 3. That being the legendary Toy Box mode. If you don't know, the Toy Box mode is this sandbox game where you basically customize your own western town into whatever you want. By completing missions given to you, you can get money and unlock toys from Al's Toy Barn. All of these toys even have little fun ads to each of them. It's the same type of ads you see on TV. It's really cool. But for the stuff you can get, well, you can ride Bullseye, drive in a car in the stunt area, get the goo where you could shrink or grow anything. You can even customize the buildings in your own town to whatever you want. Even NPCs you can customize too. And that's just scratching the surface on how much you can do in this mode. You're going to be spending a lot of time here, and for good reason, because this mode is so much fun. I think I spent more time here than I did in the actual main game, and I haven't even done everything here yet. Though that's mostly because I have a video to do, but still, this mode is awesome. It really feels like you're playing with a bunch of toys. And like the main campaign, you could play through it with a friend, which is really cool as well. Now I am playing the PS3 version of this game, and this version actually has some exclusive content related to the Toy Box mode. You see, the PS3 wasn't doing that well during the first couple years of its life, so later on, Sony really turned things around by introducing the PS3 Slim and making PS3s in general at a cheaper price, and also securing exclusive content for some multi-platform games, one of those being Toy Story 3. In the PS3 version, you can actually play as Zurg in the Toy Box, and he has his own missions to do. He's pretty fun to play as, and I love that he shoots plastic balls like he did in Toy Story 2. I wouldn't say this alone makes the PS3 version the best version to play, but if you like Zurg, then yeah, pick this version up. But overall, yeah, the Toy Box mode is fantastic. And what's really interesting about this is that the developers, Avalanche, would go on to do the Disney Infinity series, and those games would bring back the Toy Box mode from this game. That's really cool. This game is fantastic all around. I had an absolute blast playing through the entire game. This, in my opinion, is the perfect Pixar game. This game perfectly encapsulates the feeling of a Pixar movie. Everything about it feels like you're playing through the actual film. And Toy Story 3 isn't even my favorite Pixar film. I still much prefer Toy Story 2 as a movie. But Toy Story 3's game is not only the best Pixar game I've played so far, but one of the best licensed games I've ever played, period. It's such a well-crafted game all around. And sure, no game is perfect, but this is the closest to a perfect Pixar game, if that makes any sense. And hey, Asobo Toy Story 3 on PS2 and PSP is still a pretty solid game on its own. Sure, it's nowhere near as good as Avalanche's game, but I had a good time with this one too, and I would also recommend hunting this game down. In fact, Toy Story 3 is a pretty accessible game to get. Copies for all versions don't go for too much. The Xbox 360 version is backwards compatible on Xbox One and Series X. It's also on Steam, though I do hear it has some issues. But hey, it's still Toy Story 3. Just go get this game if you haven't already. I Highly recommend playing it. It's a wonderful time from beginning to end. Hello, so this concludes the Pixar Marathon, for now at least. I gotta say, I'm really happy with how this turned out. Don't get me wrong, I'm still really happy about the Nicktoons Marathon, but I feel I've really improved a lot since then. I've gotten better with the editing, the voiceover, the scripting, and I feel I've just grown better as a person. I had a lot of fun going through these games, and just seeing the evolution and different developers of each era of Pixar games. If you're wondering about like a ranking of sorts, here's a tier list of all the main games I've talked about so far, so you get a better idea of which games I think are the best and which games are the worst. Now, I know there are still a ton more to talk about. I still have to talk about Cars 2 and 3 and the Brave game. I know I said in a previous video that I would talk about these in the marathon, but I do want to take a break from covering Pixar games for a bit, since I am getting a little burnt out from talking about them. Plus, I feel Toy Story 3 was the perfect game to end the first batch of Pixar reviews on, since it is the biggest review I feel of the marathon. Not by length, I still think Ratatouille is a little longer, but just on impact, this is the biggest review for the marathon since, it is the finale, if that makes any sense. And that's not even all of them. I still got a few other Toy Story games, one other Monsters Inc. game, the crossover game on Connect, the mountains and mountains of handheld versions of these games. Yeah, there's still a ton to talk about. Maybe later this year I'll talk about a few more Pixar games. Who knows, maybe I'll tackle a batch of the handheld games. But for now, I'm gonna take a little break from talking about Pixar games. But I also just wanted to tell you guys from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for the support. Like, it means so much to me that people enjoy me talking about these games. Like, it makes me so happy seeing that stuff. Again, I want to thank my family, friends, mutuals, viewers, subscribers, followers, everyone who has supported my channel. It means so much to me. Love you guys. Now, in terms of what's next, well, I'm not totally sure yet, so we'll see. But anyways, thank you again for supporting me, and I hope you all enjoyed the first batch of Pixar vids. Hope you all have an amazing day, and take care. Bye. Thanks again.